Welcome to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. I'm Alfredo Brown, joined as always by Dave Kluge. We've got Jagger May here joining us from the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And today, you guys have just been loving these 32 headlines from each of the teams. Our staff at Football Guys, they spend over 200 hours per week putting together all these different training camp reports to give you guys the best information that you need. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into this, guys. We're going to go in alphabetical order, really quick, rapid fire. Let's start out with the first team, Arizona Cardinals. Right now, all the wide receivers look good. Is this Kyler Murray's best supporting roster, Dave?
Yeah, I think he's always had one, maybe two good weapons. You look back at Larry Fitzgerald and DeAndre Hopkins and Zach Ertz, but we're getting word out of camp that Marvin Harrison looks all the part of being an elite receiver. Greg Dortch is catching everything coming his way. Michael Wilson's taking a step forward, and Zay Jones is looking like a very serviceable, whether he's a wide receiver 3 or 4, rotational piece. Trey McBride there. We've talked about it a lot. I think Kyler Murray is one of the best values in drafts this year. He's my QB 6. Yeah.
Same.
And I think that's well above consensus. But with the rushing upside, with the fast pace that we expect the Cardinals to be running, and with these weapons, it's hard not to get excited about Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I know. It's like we were talking ahead of the show. Like, even if you think about the offensive line and the moves they've done there, I don't think I've ever seen Kyler Murray have not just one, but 2 and apparently 3 serviceable running backs. You really got to think you want to like every little piece of this offense you can, including like your Greg Dortches and your Zay Joneses late.
Jagger really had to make himself sad and talk about the fact that they have 3 potentially serviceable running backs.
You caught that.
No Trey Benson.
Yeah, you caught that. Thank you.
Sub-headline from the Cardinals. Maybe pump the brakes on Trey Benson?
Maybe. All right, next team on here, Atlanta Falcons. Rondale Moore out for the year with a knee injury.
Go pick up Ray McLeod, right? That's the actionable advice.
That opens up the door for your favorite wide receiver, Darnell Mooney, who we should all be drafting in the first round, you said? Because there's no difference between him and Drake London and Garrett Wilson.
I mean, Darnell Mooney, I think, is being slept on a little bit. It seems like everybody has just kind of decided, like, this is where, you want to stop drafting wide receivers and kind of that Jameson Williams tier, and then 2, 3, 4 rounds later, you can get Darnell Mooney, a guy who's got a 1,000-yard season under his belt and has a good quarterback here. And I understand the excitement for Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but Darnell Mooney could be a good value as a potential wide receiver too in this offense.
You guys heard it, a 1,000-yard season.
That is a 1,000-yard season more than Drake London has. Just saying.
All right, well, before we keep going here, I just want to remind everybody, we've got a ton of ways for you to enjoy this show, either on youtube.com/@FootballGuysFantasy or over on the audio versions of this show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And Dave, we got another Listener League winner that we want to give
very deserving winner.
Oh, it's fantastic. MK Schoner, I hope I'm saying it right. Shiner, whatever it is. MK, he stole 3 different iPhones and left 3 different reviews on Apple Podcasts. And boys and girls, that teaches you that crime pays. So, MK, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. And we're actually going to keep this going. More of those Apple Podcast reviews are going to get you into the running to be in the Listener League. We're going to announce 2 winners next Monday, August 19th, as we're getting closer and closer to that Listener League draft.
Like I say, we're here in Canton, Ohio right now at the Fantasy Football Expo. We got a chance to meet last year's winner. That was a really cool experience at the party last night. So excited to have you back, Mike, and hopefully you can run it back a second time this year.
Yeah, he just kept making fun of us for losing in our own league. It was a little depressing. All right, let's go to our next team here. Baltimore Ravens. Isaiah Likely. This is the name we keep talking about all offseason. He's just continuing to impress, which, I mean, yeah, we know he's good at football. But teams expected to run a lot more 2 tight end sets. So, guys, I mean, Jagger, I'll start with you first, right? I think Isaiah Likely is a name that's probably talked about more in Dynasty. But in redraft, how high are you willing to draft him, or if at all? Like, is this more of just something that affects other players in the Ravens, or are you willing to take a shot on Isaiah Likely?
Especially after the camp reports now and hearing that they want him to be like not just a tight end, but kind of the wide receiver too. I think you kind of have to take a shot at him, and especially depending on how you're drafting your tight ends. And if you have Mark Andrews, just take Isaiah Likely and you don't have to worry about tight end after that. Just take him.
Dave, I know you moved him up in your rankings just as we were starting the show here. Where do you have him ranked now?
He's my tight end 17. So, we talk about it. There's a very clear-cut, tight top 8 that you want to draft. But if you don't get one of those guys, tight top 8. After that, though, he kind of falls into that same tier, and you just kind of draft him late and hope for the upside. But, as far as where he's going, tight end 17, ahead of Juwan Johnson, ahead of Tyler Conklin, some other guys that we've talked about. So if you're looking to kind of double dip on late round tight ends, I think Likely has a path that week 1, he could be a full-time player in this offense.
Next team on here, Buffalo Bills. Guys, this is less news and more of just, well, we knew this. Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Chase Claypool both have had ups and downs at training camp. I'm going to venture to say there's more downs than ups, but do we expect anyone else besides Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir to be really relevant in the past? I mean, Dalton Kincaid as well, right? I think the big thing here, at least from everything I've been reading, and I think, Dave, everything that we've been talking about, is Khalil Shakir is probably going to be the lead target earner amongst the wide receivers on this team. Is that kind of where you're still at?
Yeah, he's been a standout. They said that he looks like a premier wide receiver, that he's taken a step forward. And I could be wrong here. I mean, the market is typically right on situations like this. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 3. I'm still pretty steadfast in my belief that he is going to be, if not number 1 in targets, number 2 behind Dalton Kincaid.
Jagger, I mean, you're one of our dynasty guys, right? Keon Coleman out here. I mean, he can be a good wide receiver long term. Everything from my scouting report says he's going to take a little bit of time to like get acclimated to this NFL game, right? How early do you think we could actually see him being productive for the Bills?
I think it's definitely going to be one of those like second half of the season surges, and you just need to be patient with him and be prepared to either hang on to him on your bench, or you might have to make the decision to drop him if he's not productive. But at the end of the day, you knew what you were getting when you drafted him. You should have anyway.
But the thing with Keon Coleman too is like he might not be a guy who's going to pull 140 plus targets, but he's good at getting those contested catches, especially near the end zone. So he could still have some value just if he falls into the end zone, has like a Chase Claypool type rookie season where there isn't a ton of volume, but he's still able to score double-digit touchdowns. I think that's kind of the out with Keon Coleman potentially.
Embrace the variance.
That's not something I want to. That's not something I want to bet on.
Yeah, I don't think we're embracing that variance until like week 9 or something. Right? Like that's one of those guys later that he'll probably get drafted on a bunch of teams, get dropped by a bunch of teams, and then picked up by someone late in the season and have a couple of those boom games and help get you into the playoffs. Next team on here, Carolina Panthers. Okay, I keep seeing this, and the headline here says that Jonathan Mingo's been standout in camp. But we keep seeing that everyone has been a standout for the Carolina Panthers at camp. And I'm very intrigued by this. Do we think that Jonathan Mingo is actually taking this next step? I've also heard that Xavier Legette has been great at camp. Deontay Johnson is out there crushing it. I feel like there's got to be another wide receiver on that team that I'm missing out. Oh, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen still looks good. So do we have any interest in Jonathan Mingo? Jagger, I'll start with you first because I know you probably done a little bit more of Jonathan Mingo research here on the Dynasty side.
And that research is no. I don't.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. No,
they pulled me back out.
I know. I'm okay drafting Deontay Johnson. We've talked about him as a great value. I think the reason Legette's looking good right now is because Legette is banged up, which is opening the door for Jonathan Mingo. But that's something where I just need to see it before I'll buy into it.
Yeah, and even if we see it, like I don't know how much we're gonna buy into it. There's just so many mouths there to feed, and we don't know how good this offense is truly going to be.
We'll say though, a very raw prospect. It might just be that he needed to get a year under his belt before he felt comfortable at the NFL level. He's a good athlete, and if they find ways to get the ball in his hands, maybe we could see. I mean, it can't get much worse than his rookie season.
Oh, famous last words. Be careful because it can get a lot worse. Chicago Bears here. DeAndre Swift shining in camp, especially in the receiving game. We've got not one, but 2 highlights this past week of DeAndre Swift getting one-handed catches and running downfield. He looks great. He looks, dare I say, Swift. Dave, you're our Bears guy. Yeah, I know. Hit the laugh track. Dave, Julia, cut that. Cut it. Dave, you're our Bears guy. You know basically everything that's going on in camp. I know earlier in the year you were, I think, a little bit more out on DeAndre Swift, if I remember correctly. Has anything changed there? Is he moving up in your rankings? Do you have a little bit more confidence in him?
My reason for being out on DeAndre Swift doesn't have as much to do with.
So you're still out.
I'm still out, and it's just who he is as a player. Like, he does the flashy things. He can make the one-handed catches. He can rip off the big plays. But I don't know if he's a guy who wants to take on a big workload. I think Roschon Johnson's going to be heavily involved. I think Khalil Herbert, barring a trade, he's going to have some work as well. And that's just my fear, is that we're drafting DeAndre Swift as a high-end RB1. We need insane efficiency for him to pay off at that ADP. I think there is going to be a committee approach here.
Let's go to the Cincinnati Bengals here, where, man, this is a dynasty name. So, Jagger, I'm going to go to you first. Andrei Iosivas. The drumbeat is getting louder for him. The reports out of camp is that he's been great. He has the number 3 wide receiver spot locked down, apparently. Guess we're not going to see as much Jermaine Burton as many people thought, or it could just take time for him to develop. With Yoshi, as we call him, is being this wide receiver 3, are we looking at him kind of like in a Tyler Boyd light or framing here, or is this we're probably not quite there?
He's not that kind of player. And to me, if he's going to be the wide receiver 3, I think we're going to see a lot of more Jamar Chase out of the slot. But in redraft, I don't think I'm going to be drafting Iosivas unless it's just like with the final pick. Dynasty, that's a whole different game, but it makes a lot of sense. I like Iosivas, and I thought he was going to be the T. Higgins replacement because he's that big, strong target. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a guy 6'3", ran a 4.4. He's got a big frame. He's fast. He does all those things. I'm not going out and trying to draft Iosivas, but I think what this does is like Jermaine Burton has an ADP right now in round 14. And Jermaine Burton is just slowly becoming a guy that I'm just moving further and further down my ranks. We knew that there might be some struggles at the NFL level, and I think this is just kind of confirming that. So, yeah, I mean, the pass catchers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and that's pretty much all I'm interested in Cincinnati.
Watch the Dynasty show, and we'll talk more about Iosivas for real.
Yeah. Watch the Dynasty show anyways, even if you're not a Iosivas guy. Jamar Chase has actually talked a lot about wanting to be in the slot more this year. I think he's seeing how many targets guys like CeeDee Lamb can get when they're moving around. He wants that. Next team on here, Cleveland Browns. D'Onta Foreman returns to practice. We talked about him about a week ago as one of my favorite last round picks, as a guy that just has some great contingent upside in a Browns offense that really doesn't have a starting running back at the moment. He left practice with a scary neck injury. He's back. Guys, this backfield, are you kind of just taking chances on either of them because the price is so cheap? And when I say either of them, I mean Jerome Ford and D'Onta Foreman, because I think all three of us are going to agree we're basically out on Nick Chubb. Dave, are you kind of still there? You're willing to take any one of these running backs?
Yeah, Foreman's my favorite value for sure. You can get him at the end of the drafts, and that's why you watch this show, because a lot of people are going to remember that, D'Onta Foreman injured his neck, helicoptered out of practice. Like, that sounds scary. We were like wondering if he was going to play it all this season, and then less than a week later, he's back at practice. So he saw a dip in ADP. He's going undrafted in a lot of drafts right now. You can get him for free at the very end of your draft, and I'm confident drafting him there.
Next team, Denver Broncos. Greg Dulcich.
Oh, Dallas Cowboys erasure.
I'll go back to them. That's fine. Okay, well, look you did it again.
You said alphabetical.
You
gotta stick to it.
Okay, well, spoilers. Denver Broncos are next. Dallas Cowboys on here. Rico Dowdle is the favorite to lead the team in rushing this year. Dave, you look so stupid. You look so stupid with all your Ezekiel Elliott love. You idiot.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I'm still buying Zeke. He's so cheap. I just don't like what I saw from Rico Dowdle. Like, I saw him last year, and he's a guy. Zeke is a guy too, but I think the Jerry Jones is going to get his hand in there at some point and say, start giving my boy Zeke the rock. I'm not not clamoring for Zeke by any means, but I think that he's got the out that you can draft him super late for so cheap, and he can fall into the end zone 15 times. And I think Zeke does have that frame and the familiarity with the offense and the offensive line that he'll get the goal line work. So if we're looking at a committee here where touches are going to be split among multiple guys, I want the guy who's going to be getting the goal line work, which is probably going to be Zeke.
Yeah, and what I read from that headline is like Rico Dowdle's still there. Like that's.
I still think that the team's leading rusher is not on the roster yet.
Yeah,
I think that's where we're at with the Cowboys. Honestly,
was I supposed to wear a collar today?
Yeah,
once again,
making me look
once
bad.
again, you look like an idiot.
We had a group chat
Welcome to the show.
we didn't bring you in it.
All right, next team. Spoiler alert: Denver Broncos. Greg Dulcich is healthy, showcasing speed and run after the catch ability. Looks like he's back to being himself. The question here is, how much does that really matter on the Broncos? He fits the archetype, right, of a tight end that is athletic. He has the ability to catch the ball and run after the catch, and there's not really the established wide receiver core on the team, so he could be number 1 or 2 in targets. But does that make us want to draft him at all in redraft, Dave?
I mean, like you said, he's got the really athletic profile, which is really the only thing that matters when you're a tight end in the NFL level. And just last offseason, Sean Payton was raving about this guy, saying that they were going to play him in the Joker role, that he was going to play in the backfield, he was going to play in the slot, he was going to play out wide, inline, all these sorts of things. Obviously, injuries hampered that, and we never got to see it. But again, just kind of, as Sig likes to call them, what the heck flexes, we get these what the heck tight ends that you draft at the end of your draft. And I think Dulcich is a guy that you can pair up with a Tyler Conklin or an Isaiah Likely. One of these guys, if you're not getting an elite tight end at the top of your draft, you double down late in the draft. And I think Dulcich is a great guy to throw a dart on late.
You nailed it, because that's what I said. It's like I'm not going out of my way. It's like I can't leave this draft without Dulcich. But if I'm getting missed out on tight ends, then like I'm getting the Chigs, the Dulciches. I know one of these guys is going to hit, and I think that he's as good as any. I know a lot of people are worried he doesn't block, but I don't know if anyone watched Jimmy Graham or heard of him before, but he never really blocked either. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this idea of like pairing Dulcich with one of these guys that you kind of know is going to be steady, like a Hunter Henry, who's going somewhere around like tight end 15 or 16. And
Yin and yang, as our friend Andrew Cooper likes to say. Yep.
Yeah, and you're not really having to spend much on tight ends, but it can work out. Well, yin and yang. Let's go to the Detroit Lions here, where the team views David Montgomery as their starter, and they are saying that they're going to continue to play Jahmyr Gibbs in more of a complementary role. Now, I think before we all crap our pants here and be scared that Jahmyr Gibbs isn't going to get the work, complimentary role is what he was doing last year to an extent, right? And we expected this. We knew David Montgomery was not going away. So with Jahmyr Gibbs, Jagger, do you still view him as this guy that could be going at the round 1-2 turn in redraft, or should we be, kind of giving him that discount a little bit and maybe looking at David Montgomery as a better fantasy asset this year?
I think he's worth the cost, and I think David Montgomery is worth more than what people give him credit for. Because we talk about these running backs who can win you the week. That's Jahmyr Gibbs, and they say complimentary. He's a receiving threat that they're trying to use downfield, and all it's going to take is one play to make your fantasy week. I am the biggest David Montgomery fan out there, but he needs to have a touchdown to get that.
You kind of pinpointed that word complimentary. We tend to turn that into a bad thing when it's not always a bad thing. It just quite literally means these guys complement each other. I look at this kind of like a NBA starting lineup. Someone being a starter doesn't make them the most important player on the team. You get a bunch of guys that go in there, play 3 minutes, they come right out, and then the team's second leading scorer comes in as a 6th man off the bench.
And this is just a very like thunder and lightning. Like, you know exactly what it's going to be. And last year there was so much made early in the season when David Montgomery came out, and people were freaking out on Twitter like, why aren't they using Jahmyr Gibbs? Fire Dan Campbell, fire Ben Johnson. But then we did see Gibbs' role grow, and David Montgomery had that injury. When he returned from injury in Week 10, from Week 10 through Week 18 to the end of the season, Jahmyr Gibbs was the RB5. David Montgomery was the RB13. So there's enough volume in this offense that they can both be supported. I think ADP
both
is
of them.
Both of them, yeah. I think ADP is right. Jahmyr Gibbs deserves to be where he's going in round 2. And I think that if anything, if ADP is wrong, it's that we're just too low on David Montgomery again.
Yeah, Dave Montgomery, really fun pick in some of those mid-rounds, especially those of you that are not going for running backs early. Speaking of running backs that you're not drafting early or possibly ever, Green Bay Packers, A.J. Dillon is having a great camp and, quote, looks entrenched as the RB2. Well, yeah, because Marshawn Lloyd hasn't been at camp until last week, so let's talk about that here. Jagger?
It is 2001, and I'm waiting for the A.J. Dillon breakout. It's 2002, 2022, and I'm waiting for the breakout. This is the same drumbeat I've read every year, so I have to see it. I don't know, man. I don't believe you at all.
I think the bigger storyline, even more than A.J. Dillon, best shape of his life, as we're hearing right now. I mean, there have been reports that Marshawn Lloyd is struggling to find his feet, that he hasn't looked very good. And I think this is just a reminder that in April, May, June, right after the draft, we look at every single rookie through rose-colored glasses, and we think everybody's going to be great. But the reality is there are busts. And some guys take longer to warm up. I'm not saying Marshawn Lloyd is a bust by any means, but temper expectations. I don't think I should go out and draft A.J. Dillon either, because we know what A.J. Dillon is at this point. But Marshawn Lloyd, I mean, people are drafting him in round 8, 9. He's going early, and there are big expectations, and he might struggle to live up to that.
Question, when you say drafting in round 8 or 9, are we talking best ball?
Best ball, ADP. I don't have football guys ADP pulled up, but I've got underdog ADP basically memorized at this point.
Yeah, I know. You did the Dave thing, though. I mean, Marshawn Lloyd, right. This is a rookie who's coming into the league, who's having to get used to NFL game speed, coming off of an injury right now. So that normally doesn't bode well anyways, right? So I think there's got to be a little bit of something to this. I think it's more so that we can cool our jets on Marshawn Lloyd at the moment, but I don't think it actually makes me that excited about A.J. Dillon. If anything, I think now I'm probably starting to believe a little bit more of the Josh Jacobs is going to get used in the passing game talk a little bit more. Maybe we have to justify where he's going in drafts.
Round 11 on football guys ADP. So that's still pretty early for a guy who might be the RB3.
Yeah. All right, next team on here. Houston Texans, Tank Dell, looking like he is back to 100%. I mean, we've been seeing these videos of him running all offseason. It looks like right now when the Texans are switching from 2 to 3 wide receiver sets, Tank Dell is off the field in 2 wide receiver sets. But then when they go to 3 wide receiver sets, he's on the outside and Stephon Diggs is primarily in the slot. Granted, this is preseason. This is training camp. This is just a portion of what we're going to see with their offense. So I'm sure players are going to be moving around a ton. What does this make you guys think about Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, everything that's going on there in Houston, Dave?
I mean, he caps the upside. Most teams only run 3 wide receiver sets 50 to 60% of the time. So if that's what Tank Dell is, just kind of a part-time player, the upside is obviously capped there. But still, it's Tank Dell. We know he's a really good player. He can score on just about any play whenever he gets the ball in his hands. And then there's a contingent upside as well. If Nico Collins or Stephon Diggs gets injured, Tank Dell does have the elasticity where he can move out wide and do that as well. So I'm still drafting Tank Dell. I don't know what his non-underdog ADP is, but I know he's going like round 3 and 4 in underdog, which is crazy. But if he's fallen into like the 6th round of your home draft, I think it's still worth drafting Dell there.
And I think he definitely will fall because, like, even in Dynasty, his value has dropped for Stephon Diggs reasons. So I think that he's probably one of the best values just all around in fantasy.
Yeah, I'm. Listen, we're talking about how like that could be dangerous or bad that he's not out on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. One, teams don't do this where they send out the same 2 guys every single time. Like, we're going to see something different. And the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud showed us last year how not only competent, but how explosive they can be as a team and how they're going to use their weapons. And even when Tank Dell was a rookie and undersized and all this, they used him. I cannot imagine CJ Stroud and DeMeco Ryans and this whole Texans offense saying, you know what we need less of? Tank Dell.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's
we don't
zero
need
shot.
these many explosive plays. We're scaring the fans.
Yeah, no, like absolutely not. Next team on here, Indianapolis Colts. We talk another small slot receiver here, but Indianapolis Colts. Josh Downs suffered a high ankle sprain, should miss 4 to 6 weeks. Guys, we talk about this all the time. When players get injured, it's not Madden. It's not like at the end of the 4 weeks they're back to 100%. No. The high ankle sprains, they linger. So this actually gets me very, very concerned about Josh Downs, who even if he comes back after 6 weeks, might not be the same player that we want him to be.
Even less than the potential high ankle sprain lingering, which we know those do tend to linger. It's the fact that last year, Josh Downs played almost the entire season with Gardner Minshew. I think the preseason, like getting that chemistry, getting on the same page with Anthony Richardson was just imperative.
Yeah.
And if he's going to miss out on 4 to 6 weeks of preseason and training camp with Anthony Richardson, that's concerning because that opens the door for an A.D. Mitchell or an Alec Pierce to kind of take those reps away. So Josh Downs, we've talked about it, one of my favorite picks in drafts this year. Like, just had such an under-the-radar rookie season. But
and everything was looking really good in camp. He was being talked about as the clear number 2 guy. If Michael Pittman is ever missing time or off the field, it is Josh Downs getting peppered with targets. This throws a wrench into it, like entirely, I think.
And it's a lot like JSN last year, right? Where JSN picked up that preseason injury and just never really got up to speed. Now, Josh Downs is a year 2 guy, but he's missing out on crucial preseason and training camp reps with Anthony Richardson. So, you know, I don't want to sit here because I've got this bag full of Josh Downs shares and say, like, everything's going to be fine. He's a great player, but it's definitely concerning that this injury came when it did.
Me and Jeff had Adam Hutchinson on, and it's like and you kind of alluded to this, missing those reps gives other people chances, and especially when you've spent a 2nd-round pick on someone else and someone I think is talented, is a bit concerning. And then I still think that he's pretty cheap, so you're not out a whole lot if you've already drafted, and I think you should still draft him at cost. But he becomes one that I think, because of that injury lingering, you're probably going to end up just dropping him at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah. Jacksonville Jaguars. Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie wide receiver out of LSU, and Trevor Lawrence are regularly connecting on deep balls.
Yes.
Color me not surprised. Like, we knew this was the skill set for Brian Thomas. We knew this is what Trevor Lawrence was trying to do last year with Calvin Ridley, and for whatever reason, it just was not happening. They were not connecting. Guys, this could be something where I think Brian Thomas is the guy that has kind of flown under the radar all preseason because I don't know if we're just kind of all out or we're just not really focusing on the Jaguars or thinking these players need more time to develop. But Brian Thomas could actually be one of those guys that if you're willing to stash him, you're willing to hold him at the bottom of your bench, he becomes one of those kind of league winner players that down towards the end of the season, if Trevor Lawrence looks good and Brian Thomas is coming along the way he should, we're going to get these explosive plays. And this is a guy that you can be drafting, I think off the top of my head, closer to like round 8 or 9.
You get him as a wide receiver 4, realistically.
Yeah, I just looked it up. Brian Thomas is going in round 9. And then the crazy thing is Gabe Davis is going in round 11.
Babe Davis.
Yeah, Gabe Davis is still getting out there. So I worry that if Brian Thomas takes this role that we expect him to, which is the role that was held by Calvin Ridley last year, That's what they signed Gabe Davis for, and I think that they didn't expect to get Brian Thomas, so now they've kind of got this surplus. Yeah, they've got two guys that are doing the same thing, so that's the ADP. Like, I think Brian Thomas is the guy that you want in Jacksonville to be that big threat, the big play threat. I'm just not seeing it with Gabe Davis. He has been an easy fade for me at cost.
And like I said, Brian Thomas, favorite wide receiver 4, because like where you're drafting him at, you have a high variance flex player attached to a good quarterback. So
next team on here, Kansas City Chiefs. We're buying everyone. Yeah, like I'm just gonna be honest here. There's not a whole lot of analysis. There's not a whole lot of single player headlines. Everyone has looked good at some point. I think the big thing here is that the Chiefs are going to be putting more of an emphasis on the deep ball. They're going to be putting more of an emphasis on just passing in general. I think a lot of those lines of Patrick Mahomes leading the league in passing look kind of good right now. We could be seeing another MVP season from him. I don't even want to spend too much time on this. I think we can just move on, but like buy all the Chiefs players at their cost in drafts.
What I want to say real quickly though, ADP still has Xavier Worthy ahead of Hollywood Brown. And that's confusing to me. On Underdog, they just recently flip-flopped where Hollywood Brown jumped ahead of Xavier Worthy, but I was just reading an article this morning from Albert Breer where he said that the Kansas City Chiefs, their plan is for Rashee Rice to be their Wes Welker and Hollywood Brown to be their Randy Moss. That's the comp that they're making.
He's been so excited to tell you guys.
People at home. He has been waiting. I don't know which camera, but I'm going to look at both of you as I say this because Dave has been waiting forever to drop this line, and it's infuriating.
Albert Breer, he's tied in.
Don't blame Albert Breer.
But it's just, I mean, that's what we're expecting. We've said that. They are such complementary players where Hollywood Brown can get deep, and that's just going to open up more underneath routes. So defenses are going to have to pick their poison. Are they going to let Patrick Mahomes pick them apart on short balls like he's done for the last 2 years? Or are they going to play tight, try to take away Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice, and then open up the deep balls for Hollywood Brown? This personnel that Kansas City has this year is just going to be a nightmare for defensive coordinators.
Breaking news. Chiefs are good. Why'd you have to steal it, man? Yeah. Why'd you have to steal it?
Sorry.
Go take a lap or something. Next team on here, Las Vegas Raiders. Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell still neck and neck in quarterback battle.
It's concerning. This is the only news we're getting out of Las Vegas every week is we have, if you've got 2 quarterbacks, you've got 0 quarterbacks. And that's, yikes. I'm not happy about the Raiders.
Where would the Catholic Church be without the popes?
What ship set sail without 2 captains? There's not much there, guys. I think this is a big reason that we're kind of not in on Devontae Adams this year. I mean, still a very good player, but at cost, I think we're worried he's hitting that age cliff. There's just 2 bad quarterbacks. We just don't know what to expect with the Raiders. Next team on here, Los Angeles Chargers. There's a few things going on here. So I'll say the first.
All bad.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, we'll see. So like the first one here is Justin Herbert having injured his plantar fascia. It was a tear, not just like regular old plantar fasciitis that you runners get.
Last week we're dropping him in our rankings. Yeah, that's concerning.
And it's something that he is going to keep. There's a tendency, if you will, David, that I think we're just going to keep dropping him lower and lower and lower. But I also think that this means you have to be really, really careful with the Chargers players in general. Apparently the team has major plans for Quentin Johnston to manufacture touches to get him the ball. Is this something that makes you want to draft more Quentin Johnston, or are you pretty much the same on this, Dave?
Yes. Like, non-ironically, yes. What we saw last year was them trying to put Quentin Johnston into a role that he wasn't ready for. Like, he was running a lot of downfield routes.
The NFL
wide receiver.
So I want to add some context to this, all right? Like, every single day in camp, these guys are taking hundreds of reps. And what we see is every 2 or 3 days, we see one Quentin Johnston drop. And James Harbaugh, he directly talked about this, and he said, you guys see the drops on social media, but at the end of the day, I think they view Quentin Johnston as the wide receiver 1, and they specifically said they're going to manufacture touches to get the ball in his hands. You look at what he did at TCU, that's what he did best, is on screens and slants and after the catch abilities. So I think if they start to utilize him in a way better than he was utilized last year, that could make a difference.
So that I'm reading the thing that they're not saying, which is very concerning, that you have to manufacture touches for the guy that can't get open. That was your first round draft pick. Yep. That's the way I'm looking at it. I know we can look at it any other way. Let's go to our next team here. Los Angeles Rams. Puka Nacua is week to week with a knee injury. Should be ready for the opener though. And Sean McVay is usually like pretty honest about these reports here, where he's saying, guys, he'll be fine. He'll be ready for week 1. They should be ready for the opener. Does this make you drop Puka Nacua at all in the rankings?
Yeah, I'm dropping him from my dynasty rosters, dropping him in my rankings.
Okay,
dropping him
okay.
No, I don't care. It's Puka Nacua. He's going to be fine. We should be moving Cooper Kupp up, though, and that's the other news. Like, not only are we hearing that Puka Nacua is injured, but we're also hearing that Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp, and he's 100%, and he's looking good again. So right now there's like a 2-round gap in ADP, and I think these guys should be a lot tighter because when they were on the field last year, it was very much so a 1A, 1B type of scenario.
By the way, I just want to say big props to our producer right now, Taylor, who just army crawled on the floor to get these lights back on behind us. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're only listening on the podcast, this is the episode to go over to YouTube, check out myself, Dave, Jagger. We are here together. I want to say live, I guess. Is that the appropriate word? In person? There we go. In person.
Live recording.
Yeah.
In front of a studio audience.
Yeah.
You guys give
Of
us a
our
round
peers.
of applause out there.
3 of our peers. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All 3 people.
On to
It's
the
great.
Miami Dolphins.
Yep. Miami Dolphins here. Jaylen Wright looking phenomenal in camp right now. And for those of you who did watch the preseason game, Jaylen Wright also looked great there. This is something that I think that we are hearing once again that Raheem Mostert is the starter and Devon Achan's role should grow. But if Jaylen Wright keeps looking like this in camp and in games, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. Jagger, I know this is someone you guys have probably talked about a lot on the Dynasty show here. What's the idea here with Jaylen Wright? Do we think that he's going to have a bigger role than most people expect this season?
I think he's going to have a bigger role than people expect. But the big thing is I think Devon Achan is going to be fine. This is about Raheem Mostert, guys. He's 32 years old. And I think
It's not that old. Just for the earth.
Okay.
It's fine for football.
Okay, Miami Dolphins fan. But Jaylen Wright is probably going to be the 1B role. And Raheem Mostert, I think we're going to be sending him to the farm.
I wasn't speaking as a Dolphin. I was speaking as a human that is older than 32.
Oh, I'm also 32, but I'm also not built for NFL.
Could you go out and take 250 carries in the NFL right now?
No, I could not.
I mean, in fairness, I don't think any of us could take even 2 carries in the NFL.
Well, hold your horses. I could do 2.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it so much this offseason. I'm not going to bore the audience with a bunch of redundancy.
They're already bored.
Jaylen Wright is tailor-made for this offense. Yep. He's got blazing speed. We saw it show up during the preseason game. It might take some time for him to see his role grow, but I want to draft everybody. I want to draft Achan, want to draft Mostert, want to draft Jaylen Wright. I'm just throwing darts at everybody on this offense because we know it's a highly efficient offense that runs a lot of plays.
There's a few offenses that I think we're going to do that with, and it's going to be teams like the Chiefs, the Texans, the Dolphins, the Eagles. There's a bunch of those teams that we're just willing to draft whatever their cost is and whoever the player is because we just know they're going to be good. Next team on here, let's go to the Minnesota Vikings, where TJ Hockenson has been a player that we've been kind of hoping that we'd get good news, more news, any news, right, about his knee. And he is expected to be back at some point in the first half of the season. The exact numbers on here were anywhere from week 3 to week 7. And I still stand by this, that TJ Hockenson becomes one of the perfect draft picks if you have an IR spot and you see him just falling in your redraft leagues, because you can just throw him on that IR spot. And it all depends on what happens with the Vikings, though. And this is the only thing where I start to then reel myself back. If TJ Hockenson is back by week 7 and the starter for the Vikings at that point ends up being J.J. McCarthy, I don't know how much trust I have.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we're going to see J.J. McCarthy this year. He's not getting any reps with the ones. Yeah. That's another one of those,
but that's
we
just a
see
rookie
these
quarterback
highlights
thing.
where he's throwing. I mean, it sounds like it's Sam Darnold's team. We're totally going off on a tangent.
If they're 1-6, if they're 1-6, is it still Sam Darnold's team?
Then it's Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins is the current QB too. It seems like I don't think.
Come on.
That's what they're saying out of Minnesota.
I know that's what's being reported, guys, but there's no way that they have their first round pick and they're like, we're gonna keep him behind Nick. That is such bad press for them. If you're 1-6, you're a losing team, and you're like, we're not even gonna put in our first round draft pick at quarterback.
They've got faith in Kevin O'Connell. They've got Justin Jefferson tied up on a long-term deal. They've got TJ Hockenson. I think the thing is they don't want to ruin his development. JJ McCarthy is young and raw. I mean, maybe we see him at the very end of the season, but I expect if Sam Darnold melts down early in the year, we're going to see Nick Mullins before we see J.J. McCarthy. But back to T.J. Hockenson, we talk all the time about these top 8 tight ends, and that's what you want, are these top 8 tight ends. But you got to pay up for those guys. Like Evan Ingram at the end of that tier is going in round 6. So I think if you miss out on those guys, we talk about doing the double tap late in drafts, but T.J. Hockenson is another great target where you can pair him up with a boring Hunter Henry, Tyler Conklin type of guy, but draft T.J. Hockenson in the 10th round, knowing that you might still be getting top 5 production from a tight end over the second half of the season.
Yeah, I still think that Hockenson becomes a really nice value pick. I'll just finish with this on the Vikings thing. I think that if you want this guy, J.J. McCarthy, who needs reps to get reps, you put him in the game at some point. Like, I don't think you're helping his development by keeping him off the field. Let's go to our next team here. New England Patriots. Juju Smith-Schuster was released, so that happened.
Let's send this over to our Patriots correspondent, Jagger May. What do you think about Juju Smith-Schuster getting released?
And that's it. Going on to the New Orleans Saints. Reports are that the team wants to run the offense through Alvin Kamara. Yeah, that's not surprising, guys.
Yeah.
It's not surprising.
Give it to your good guys. What a concept.
Yeah, we've been pounding the table, and I've said it
different table.
multiple times that like Alvin Kamara is not a 29-year-old running back in the way that Ezekiel Elliott or Leonard Fournette are 29-year-old running backs. He has been a master at avoiding contact throughout his career. What he does is more out in open space rather than between the tackles. He's not getting rolled up by 300-pound linemen all the time. And he might have lost a little bit of a step last year. Didn't have quite the efficiency he saw early in his career, but Derek Carr sucks at pushing the ball downfield, and he is just going to keep just putting the ball in Alvin Kamara's hands. Yeah. We could see Kamara seeing 6 or 7 targets per game this year.
Yeah. So we were talking on the plane ride here. It's like the Saints have a huge Derek Carr problem, which is great for Alvin Kamara.
Speaking of huge quarterback problems, the New York Giants. Daniel Jones is reportedly healthy and playing with no limitations except for all of the limitations he has when he's playing healthy. So Malik Nabers didn't get a single target in his preseason debut. And I know we wanted to avoid kind of talking about preseason games because just ridiculous things happen in these games. But there was a quote that came out from Malik Nabers where Daniel Jones actually did not play. It was Drew Lock. And so I think what that does is that opens the door to make more questions about this team of like, it doesn't really matter who's starting. The offense could just be very, very bad. Malik Nabers said this. He said, I did a very good job of getting open, but everything has to go my way to get the ball. And I think a lot of people saw that quote and left it at that quote. He did give a little more context where he said, it was kind of slippery out there. I could have done a better job of creating separation, which, by the way, he just said I did a very good job of getting open, whatever. Getting better looks for the QB to throw the ball in better spots. That's all I can do. Continue to do what I do. Dave, you and I have talked about this because we watched the New York Giants offseason Hard Knocks where Malik Nabers has been very open that he will get in his quarterback's face if he's not getting the ball. I am terrified of this Giants roster in general, and I think the only thing I'm doing is maybe throwing some darts at these running backs that are like last-round picks, Tyrone Tracy, Eric Gray, those guys. I don't know that I want anyone else in this Giants offense.
You know, I think one of the biggest blind spots that I have as an analyst is just saying bet on talent. Like, talented players are going to do good things.
You're a dynasty guy, Dave.
I am. And maybe that's my dynasty brain leaking into my redraft. And I've said that. Like, Malik Nabers is a talented player. They're going to get the ball in his hand. He can score big plays. And, Alfredo, I'm going to give you your flowers because a few weeks ago you said, you know, this could be a Garrett Wilson type of scenario where he's a good player, but he's on a bad offense, and sometimes that doesn't work out. And I think that is kind of the fear that I'm having with Malik Nabers. And we're drafting him darn near close to his ceiling where he's going in rounds 2 and 3 right now. Everything needs to break right for him to pay off there. And the reality is he could see 130 targets and still end up with 1,100 yards and 3 touchdowns, and that's not what you want with your second or third round pick. So I'm still drafting him because I like the player, but I will not deny that he has almost no floor.
And you got to really make the decision. How much do you want Daniel Jones to stress you out this year? Like, just like think about that. Like, how much do you want him to stress you out? And that should be like your indicator of whether or not he is going to be a wide receiver 1. And like, I love the Garrett Wilson comp because it's also sad and it's also someone else who's riding in New York. But I mean, Malik Nabers, I love that you said like you're getting him at his ceiling. And even in Dynasty, this makes me feel better about Roma Dunze or some of them other rookies a lot cheaper because you have that same upside.
What this tells me, and like we kind of keep talking about all these guys that are going around the same area in the draft, whether it's Malik Nabers, Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., a bunch of these guys that wide receiver position from like, I don't know, like wide receivers 8 through like 15. It feels like we're drafting a bunch of guys that we're drafting them at their ceiling. It almost feels like those rounds 3, 4, maybe even late 2 end up being some of the best spots to get running backs we're seeing. Like Jonathan Taylor's going there. Saquon Barkley is going there. If anything, this is telling me I want to try to get one of the top flight wide receivers in round 1 and that I can grab some of these other good running backs in round 2 or 3, which I know that doesn't always work out for everybody, but so many of these wide receivers are being drafted at their ceiling as opposed to being drafted at their floor, which other guys that are being drafted at their floor, like Dave, you're pulling it up right now. Debo Samuel's kind of being drafted at what could be his floor. Mike Evans being drafted at what could be his floor.
And I'm a little bit lower on Nabers. Like I've got him, I'd be drafting him in the fourth or fifth round, but you're not getting him there. And in a lot of drafts right now, like people are looking at a decision like, do I want Cooper Kupp or Malik Nabers?
It's Cooper Kupp.
It's Cooper Kupp. Yeah, absolutely. Cooper Kupp. And I think that's it. Is that like you can kind of take the safety in these early rounds. You don't need to swing for the fences at the end of the second round, and that's what you're doing if you're drafting Nabers.
And like I said, those like the Brian Thomases, all those other even we talked about like Cooks. There's some swing for the fence players that aren't going to cost you your entire draft.
Darnell Mooney.
Anyway, what's our next team?
Oh, don't worry. We're going to talk about another guy here who we bring up like almost every episode. New York Jets, Tyler Conklin. I'm just kidding. We're not talking about Tyler Conklin. Mike Williams, cleared to practice. He's out on the field. Guys, we've heard this song before many, many times. And honestly, this might be the Dolphins fan in me. This might be, I don't know, the pessimist in me. I am having such a hard time being okay with the Jets and any type of excitement surrounding the Jets. They've
only got one of the best quarterbacks of all time playing for him this year.
Sure, but they've also got a guy who's the oldest he's ever been in his career, coming off an Achilles injury with an offensive coordinator who really hasn't shown that he can do anything over the last few years. They've got a wide receiver, Mike Williams, who can't stay healthy. They've got there are issues, and I think we're so excited about what they could be. This is a team that I feel like often we're drafting them at their ceiling, and we're not really looking at what their floor could be, even though we've seen their floor repeatedly. So Mike Williams is the guy specifically talked about here. Does he change anything for you guys in terms of fantasy, for Garrett Wilson, for Aaron Rodgers, for Malachi Corley, for Breece Hall, for anybody on here?
Mike Williams is a hard fade for me, and my reason for fading Mike Williams doesn't have to do with his injury, doesn't have to do with the new team. It's 100% Aaron Rodgers. We know that Aaron Rodgers, the first thing that, the most important thing to Aaron Rodgers is having trust and chemistry in his wide receivers. And Mike Williams is showing up here a month before the season kicks off. He's not going to have time to build that trust and that chemistry with him. So I think we're going to see, as crazy as it might sound, like Allen Lazard being a preferred target for Aaron Rodgers over Mike Williams.
Dave loves Allen
Malachi Corley is a guy who has been healthy all of camp and getting reps with Aaron Rodgers. I think it's just going to come down to there not being enough time for Aaron Rodgers and Mike Williams to develop the chemistry that's needed for Aaron Rodgers to trust somebody. So Mike Williams, he's not a separator. He's not going to be on an island where Aaron Rodgers can hit him. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers needs to trust him to come down with contested catches, and I don't know if they're going to be able to get there in time for the season.
And it's like Mike Williams is like one of those things, well, he's cheap, but like there's other guys that's cheap that have more hope.
Exactly.
All I'm hearing is draft Tyler Conklin. That's what I'm hearing.
Also, Alfredo, every quarterback's the oldest that they've been in their career.
I was hoping that you would pick up on that. I was hoping you'd pick up on that.
Bijan Robinson is the oldest he's ever been today.
That's right. Philadelphia Eagles report coming out is that Dallas Goedert is standing out in camp. And I'm just going to say this. Have we heard a bad thing about anyone on the Philadelphia Eagles team this offseason? Jalen Hurts looks phenomenal. A.J. Brown looks phenomenal. Devontae Smith looks the best he's ever been. Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley. Everyone looks great. So the advice here is just go draft Philadelphia Eagles, guys. There you go.
We know they're a good offense.
Goddard has been a handcuff. That's my only thing. Is like no matter who's been the offensive coordinator, he's only been good when one of the big two have been out, meaning A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
And pre-A.J. Brown, it was when Zach Ertz would get hurt.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like he needs an injury to elevate up the depth chart. And right now we know he's going to be like third in the pecking order. I mean, this is a guy whose like best season was a hair over 800 yards a few years ago.
So are you drafting him as a starting tight end? I've seen some rankings where he is a top 12 tight end. I do not have him there. I think I have him closer to like tight end 14 or 15.
So he's my tight end 14, but he falls
behind
right
Taysom
into
Hill.
That. Yeah, behind Taysom Hill, yeah. He just falls into that tight end dead zone for me where
I love you
Bowers.
and hate you so much. I love you and hate you so much.
You're Brock Bowers is in the dead zone?
I want to list these tight end rankings really quick for Dave. At tight end 10, it's Jake Ferguson. Tight end 11, TJ Hockenson. 12 is Brock Bowers. 13, Taysom Hill. 14, Dallas Goedert. 15, Pat Freiermuth.
I just want to say I was second in Fantasy Pros ECR tight end rankings last year.
Okay. All right. I guess I can't argue.
I can put that feather in my cap.
I got second place at 8th grade track and field tournament. You don't see me bragging about it. Let go of the past.
I read the most books in 5th grade.
Spelling bee champ. All right. Let's move on here. Pittsburgh Steelers. The headline is that Justin Fields is Justin Fields. The schnozberries taste like schnozberries, guys.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so we got Justin Fields doing Justin Fields things. We got Russell Wilson missing practice. Allegedly, there's a quarterback competition.
So
I don't think it matters.
I put this show sheet together, and what I mean by Justin Fields is that we see the camp highlights. We see him ripping off these big rushes. We see him connecting deep with George Pickens, and then we see him fumbling the ball. We see him struggling with his footwork.
Both of those were the center, though. That's been out. Like, you can't just omit. And again, I'm not trying to
explain the sacks where he's sitting there with stone feet standing in the pocket and getting.
How do you explain a Steeler getting sacked? The Steelers.
I mean, both sacks he had time.
Okay.
We've seen him, George Pickens, deep downfield, wide open on an island, and he can't hit him. And that's the thing. Like, I understand what Steelers fans are going through. I felt this personally for years. Like, the highlights are so alluring. I genuinely think 2 years ago, Justin Fields had one of the best, single-season highlights in NFL history. But he struggles to read a defense. His footwork's terrible. He's got a slow drop back.
I'll never quit Justin Fields. No, I'm kidding. But it feels like it. I kind of should quit. But,
I want to lead every show with a Justin Fields headline of some sort and just invite Jagger on for 90 seconds.
So here's what I'll say. This is a fantasy football show. And if Justin Fields is starting, he's a top 5 quarterback. That's easily. But I don't know if we can expect him to start because he still has the same struggles that he had in Chicago. It doesn't seem like he's taken that step forward.
This was fun, guys. Let's not do this ever again.
No.
San Francisco 49ers. Christian McCaffrey injured his calf.
Oh.
Cut that out,
Bang,
Julia.
bang, bang. You're welcome.
Boo? Can you hit the boo on the roadcast? Everyone just throw your tomatoes at Alfredo, please.
It's better when you say it multiple times. So he's taking his recovery slowly. And that just seems
I get it. Calf, his calf, McCaffrey.
Nailed it.
All right.
Nailed it. These jokes get funnier the more you explain them. You're welcome. So the 49ers, and Kyle Shanahan has said this multiple times, he is going to take things very slowly with these players that are recovering because it's not just McCaffrey. We see Elijah Mitchell also has an injury, and there's been hype about Jordan Mason at the running back spot as well. I think the Niners just want to keep everyone healthy. They just want to get them to the season. There's all the, I know we're not allowed to say his name, but Brandon Ayuk stuff going on. I'm sorry, I said it. The Christian McCaffrey injury, does this make you not take him at 1 overall?
No, he's still 1 overall.
All right.
I wouldn't take him 1 overall for other reasons, but.
Because he's an old running back.
Let's talk about this.
And you're an ageist.
Oh, Dave knows me. Dave knows me so well. You're a running back that's over 27. There's no way I'm taking you first overall.
I get it. I mean, disgusting. It's hard to fade Christian McCaffrey because his efficiency hasn't changed whatsoever. He has been aging like a bottle of fine wine. He is still, and of course the injury risk is there. The risk that he falls off the cliff is there. But typically we see trends before a player falls off the cliff, and he's not showing those. He just had one of his most efficient seasons ever last year. Since he's shown up in San Francisco, he has just been unbelievable. So I'm still taking him number 1 overall. And I want to say the only reason we're not talking about Brandon Ayuk is because we're recording on Saturday afternoon, and the episode comes out Monday, and who knows what can change between now and then. So, just keep an eye on Brandon Ayuk news, which is changing by the hour.
Dave does not like to embrace variance.
You heard that. Dave just predicted Brandon Ayuk going to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
What's that timestamp? I'm going to clip that. 48.
Leave the comment. What an idiot.
Dave hot take.
That's going to be a lot of timestamps. Seattle Seahawks, next team on here. DK Metcalf seeing a lot of targets across the middle of the field in practice. So this is different. I mean, not seeing a lot of targets, but getting DK Metcalf to do some new things in this offense is pretty fun. I think we're going to see DK Metcalf in essentially the Rome Odunze role. That we saw with Washington, and Jackson Smith-Njigba, is going to be getting a lot of those deep routes from the slot, which worked so well in that Huskies offense last year with Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, by the way. That's why I keep referencing Washington. He was the offensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies in college, now for the Seattle Seahawks. And so with DK Metcalf, you hear that he's getting a lot of targets in a new way. Does this make you buy in on him more? Or maybe we're going to see less explosive plays, but we're going to see more volume for DK Metcalf? Is that kind of where we're at? Because every report about every player, Ken Walker, it's been positive. JSN, it's been positive. DK Metcalf, it's been positive. The only guy I haven't really heard about is Tyler Lockett too much.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett's so buried in ADP. Yeah. This is another one. I like buying into good offenses, and I think that all of these guys are pretty appropriately priced right now. DK Metcalf, wide receiver 22. JSN, wide receiver 44. Tyler Lockett, wide receiver 51. I could see a path where all three of those guys can outperform their ADP. We'd need Geno Smith to look more like 2022 Geno Smith than 2023 Geno Smith, but I think Ryan Grubb could really inject some explosiveness into this offense. So I know it's a cop-out, it's the boring answer, and everyone wants to plant a flag on one of these three wide receivers. I think they're all appropriately priced.
Yeah, and I think we finally won with DK because I didn't like wide receiver 1 price DK. I didn't love wide receiver 2. Now you can easily get him in wide receiver 3 depending on your build, and he's a guy who's going to win your week sometimes. Like we know who he is as a player.
And when you can start your draft with like one of those elite wide receivers, get a CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill at the top of the draft, then you get Cooper Kupp at the end of the round 2, and then DK sitting there at the top of round 3.
Mm-hmm. You're set.
I don't care who my running backs are. Like, that is a heck of a wide receiver trio to start off with.
Next team on here, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jalen McMillan, rookie. We talked about Washington. Out of Washington, he has been consistently impressing coaches for the Buccaneers staff. And this is a guy that I think they drafted specifically to play on the outside. And there's been a little bit of, I guess, perceived competition between he and Trey Palmer, with Chris Godwin going to be playing a lot more in the slot. So I think this is going to be one of those things where we see if they're in 2 wide receiver sets, we're going to see a lot of Godwin. If they go to 3 wide receiver sets, Godwin's going to the slot, McMillan playing on the outside quite a bit. Jalen McMillan's a really talented player, guys. And I think that he could be one of those that has a lot of good contingent upside if we get an injury. Mike Evans is a robot, and he doesn't miss time. But if Chris Godwin misses time for any reason, Jalen McMillan could actually become a fantasy viable player. Is this a guy that we're looking at late in drafts? I did a draft last week with a couple different analysts from the industry. Jamie Eisenberg from CBS took Jalen McMillan in round 13. And he's been very high on him. And I like Jalen McMillan as well.
And he's down in Florida too. Like if I recall, he goes to Bucs camp, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like you guys. Josh Palmer used to be like a wide receiver handcuff. I think especially if you're drafting one of these Bucs guys, I would pick up Jalen McMillan because he can slot right in. And if he does, become something without it, great. Like if you're buying him in the 13th round, you probably have a droppable player. But maybe you have like a high-end, high-upside flex guy. Rest in peace, Trey Palmer. I'm all in on McMillan.
Rest in peace his fantasy value.
Yeah,
rest in peace his fantasy value.
He's still with us in spirit, just not.
There's also been like some good buzz about Cade Otton. So I think that from fantasy purposes, like we want Chris Godwin, we want Mike Evans, but I think there's just going to be kind of this hodgepodge of Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer and Cade Otton, and I don't know if I'm interested in any of these guys in fantasy. Like the reality is, in most leagues, Jalen McMillan is probably going to be on waivers, if not to start the season, some point early in the season. So then, if Mike Evans or Chris Godwin goes down, then we're talking about Jalen McMillan as a guy you want to pick up and drop some fab on, but he's not a guy that I want to waste a draft pick on.
Next team on here, we got 2 teams left. We're going to beat the buzzer here, just under an hour. Tennessee Titans. Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears have been listed as the running backs 1A and 1B on the depth chart.
Oh, thanks for the clarity. That's exactly,
But we've known this. Like, nothing has changed. But if anything, I think that's good. I think that's good for us to actually see that nothing has changed, because all it does is continue to suppress their draft cost and keep them low when we go into these drafts. And I think that if you're drafting either of these guys, it means that you typically like ambiguous running back situations, or you are going to draft a late running back. So this is kind of what you want to see. You want to see that they're a 1A, 1B, and just, hey, let me just take whoever's cheapest. And right now, that's why I still lean Tyjae Spears here.
Well, Tony Pollard was listed as the 1A, and Tyjae Spears was listed as the 1B. So
but Tyjae Spears is like a round cheaper.
No,
2 rounds maybe.
And this is another one where I like both of these guys, standalone value and contingent upside for either of them. I think Tony Pollard is just the better running back, but that's why you got to pay up for him a little bit. And I don't know if it's going to be like a clear 50-50 split, but this is one where I want to draft one of these running backs. It's not one where I want to double tap, because then you are investing a lot of draft capital and kind of capping your own upside if you do that. But I like targeting Tony Pollard, and if I miss out on him, then I immediately turn my sights to Tyjae Spears. I like both of these guys, and I think that they're both an injury away from really being fantasy relevant, but there could be some weekly standalone value here.
Last team on here, Washington Commanders. Rookie tight end Ben Sinnott is, quote, buried on the depth chart.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Dave, how are you feeling right now? Because you were ranking Sinnott a lot higher earlier in the season. I already see you're making your adjustments now.
Yeah. And I did say, I had the asterisk next to my Sinnott take saying,
don't do that.
I did it. I mean, I did it.
I was here with you on the episode. I don't have to watch the tape. I lived it.
Saying,
I lived it.
Dave's middle name is Cop Out.
3-4 weeks ago, we talked about Sinnott, and I said, I've got Sinnott right now inside my top 15, but I'm going to be keeping my ear to the beat in Washington. If Zach Ertz is getting reps with the ones over Sinnott, I'm moving Sinnott down. And Zach Ertz is getting reps with the ones, and it seems like Sinnott right now is struggling to climb that depth chart. So, yeah, I've dropped Sinnott right now. He's my tight end 26. The guys ahead of him.
Big asterisk.
Yeah, the guys ahead of him, Tucker Kraft, Cole Kmet, Noah Fant, guys you're getting at the very end of your
You
draft,
almost called him Noah Cant. That would have been
Cant.
great.
That's a Freudian slip.
But, yeah, Sinnott is unfortunately pretty much off my board in redraft drafts at this point. Still like the long-term outlook in Dynasty, but yeah, as far as redraft, moving off of Sinnott pretty hard.
Cliff Kingsbury has adopted Zach Ertz or something. He's got like some affinity with it. I'm not saying Zach Ertz isn't bad, but like we saw the same thing with the Cardinals. They drafted Trey McBride, and he's like, nope, I'm going to go with the old but gold. You know,
And that's why I had that caveat, because we saw it. We saw Zach Ertz hold Trey McBride, who like last year when he got his opportunity, looked like one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yep.
A 34-year-old rotting husk of a corpse in Zach Ertz was able to hold him at bay for a year and a half. So.
Dave was harsher than me, but he's right. I was being nice.
I think my biggest thing here is not even the Zach Ertz thing or the Cliff Kingsbury thing. It's that I don't know that rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels is going to be supporting 2 or 3 targets on this team.
And I wanted to buy into the rookie narrative, right? Like where they were getting reps together in rookie minicamp, and I was hoping, but you know, death, taxes, and Cliff Kingsbury loving Zach Ertz.
Well, there we go, guys. We did it. 32 teams in under an hour. We nailed this in person live. We're also going to be having the Dynasty Show recording here in person live as well. For those of you who have watched and listened all the way through, of course, as always, we want to thank you guys. I want to remind everybody, make sure you are subscribed to the Football Guys Daily News Updates. We're going to get everything that you need for your fantasy football team and all the news from preseason delivered straight to your email inbox from the man himself, Joe Bryant. For myself, for Dave Kluge, for Jagger May, I want to thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time. Adios.